to episode 4 of season 2 of The Creative Rebels.
Yeah, series 2, episode 4. What a wild week it's been.
Well, it's been a crazy week. Well, I've not been here much. I've been up in Chester at a conference.
Yeah, and I'm going to Holland next week, which is going to be insane. So, yeah, really busy work stuff. And quite often we get asked, how do you produce so much free content?
I think the first thing is we're really passionate about it. Like, if you love doing something so much, you'll find time, you'll make space to actually go and do that.
Yeah, we do make time for the podcast, and we are very organised in how we do that. So knowing that I'm not going to be here next week, we'll make sure that we have everything recorded and ready to go. We've actually got episodes for you guys in the bank all the way up until the end of March that are ready to release. So we are super kind of prepared when it comes to that sort of stuff. And I think a lot of people sort of, so I met someone last night and they said, the first question, do you make money from the podcast? People do kind of focus on like the fact that we do give the podcast away for free. So I think that obviously the podcast does benefit our business, and out of the thousands of people that listen to it, a small percentage of those work in agencies. Yeah. Some other of you guys have booked us to come and do speaking gigs and that sort of stuff. So there's different ways that we are making money, that the podcast is helping grow our business, but that's not necessarily kind of directly linked to the podcast.
Yeah, it's really nice that since doing it, we now have clients that have come from you guys listening, which is amazing. And we've had quite a few mural campaigns and some other things that are in the pipeline at the moment that are quite exciting things that, because we've started this, it's managed to turn into that. And like, we're not doing it with that reason of like, we're just doing this to get jobs. It's like, since starting it, we've now got such a passion for like helping you guys. Like, it's so rewarding to see your DMs come through, to see all the messages, to see your wins, to see what you need help with, because as soon as you tell us, then we can adjust our content to help you.
Yeah, we've had a couple of messages from people recently saying that they're thinking of starting their own podcast, and our advice to you is like, yeah, if you've got a good idea and you think you can make it work, definitely do it, because it's certainly changed our lives. Yeah.
The people you meet from it, it's just amazing. Like, it's so rewarding to be able to be sat in a room with people you find inspiring, find interesting, people who can potentially help you in your future career as well. To be sat in the room with them is such a great opportunity, and the people you meet will change your life.
So yeah, if you would like to work with us, you can email us, connect@creativerebels.co. But for most of you, you won't be employing us, and that's absolutely fine. But you can always leave us an iTunes review if you like, because that does really help the show. I know a lot of people for New Year have been coming up with, instead of doing New Year's resolutions, they've been coming up with a word for the year. Mm-hmm. And I really like that concept. And I think because whatever word you choose can really impact your next 12 months, because you're always thinking of that word and how you can steer things in that way. And I think a big word for me this year, it's been coming up over and over again quite organically, is the word impact. And actually thinking of it now, like everyone's talking about like influencers, hopefully like impact doesn't have like start to have that nasty,
it starts to change its kind of meaning into something else.
But for right now, as of January 2020, impact is for me like, so I don't know like what we're going to be called, like an impactor.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of like a superhero name, like the Impactor.
Yes.
So yeah, we could definitely go with that. I think it's so much more, especially in an age where influencers kind of lost its meaning, to actually have an impact is a lot more important. And that's something that you can actually like, I suppose, but you could have an impact for good and impact for bad, but hopefully you'd have an impact for something that's going to progress the world in some way.
Yeah, I think it's going to become my word of 2020. I'm going to look at sort of how you can have the most impact, and that for me like looks of like just in a small way becoming part of people's lives there's that thing, isn't there, of would you rather help 1 million people and they never know who you are, and you like never meet them, or would you rather like help one person and they know who you are? And it's like, I would rather help 1 million people and not ever get any like props for it, because I think that's really beautiful, like help as many people as you can. So impact is my word going forward.
I think having that word is really, really powerful as well, because then if you every time you make a decision, you just ask yourself which one of these will make the most impact. Then I think whatever your word is, say if your word was to be caring, for example, or kindness, and you thought, well, what decision will lead to that thing? And yeah, I think that's a positive route. I need to think of my own word for the year then.
Yeah, I wonder how it would affect our lives if your word was completely different to mine.
Yeah, so I'll have a think about that. But I feel like impact is something that I'm definitely passionate about. So let's go with that.
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier the good types of impact and the bad types of impact. Certainly we're having a very bad impact on the current environment with fast fashion. So the quick turnaround of from design to rail and then in the bin straight after, even if it's not sold off the shelves.
And even just the mass unsustainability of the way that these products are produced, like with all the cotton farms and all of the negative things that the fashion industry has on the world for sustainable reasons, not just for wasting clothes. It's the whole thing. But I suppose we get into that quite a lot in this episode.
Yeah, this week we're talking to Lauren Bravo. This was such a fascinating conversation, and I really enjoyed her book, and I learned so much about the just weird industry that this is.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where people just don't really know much about it. Like, there's a lot more coming out now in the press and stuff around fast fashion and how bad of an industry it is. But yeah, this episode was really insightful to just actually find out what is going on and what you can do to be a better person.
Yeah, it really made me kind of dig into my own head and think about like as long as you've known me, I've always been like all
into
about
fashion.
Interested by clothes and like wearing bright colors. And for me, like I would always lean towards stuff that the majority of people weren't wearing. But then I still had kind of like a tribe that I wanted to be a part of. Yeah. So I've been kind of looking back in my past, and I think like going to a school where I was like bullied for not having much money, and like not being able to afford anything. Like as soon as I was in charge of my own finances and I could dress myself.
So I suppose fill that gap.
Build my character around it. So like so much of my identity now is tied up in the clothes that I wear. And it's like, because I could never come out and just be wearing something boring. I've always got to have something stupid on.
Yeah, whereas I always go out wearing something boring. So what do you think your main takeaway was from this episode?
So I don't think it's hyperbolic for me to actually say that I think that her book has changed my life. It's definitely had an impact. There we go. It's definitely had an impact on me. And I have, and it's funny actually, the timing of it, because I've started to care a lot less about that stuff over the past like 3 or 4 years. And I think now I really don't give a shit. And so for example, when we were at Apple Store with Reggie Yates, like Reggie said to me like, oh, I really loved the sweater that I had on at the time. He was like, oh, I really love that brand and I really love that sweater. And that like that's Reggie Yates, and he's like bigging up your outfit. It's like super cool. And I was like pumped for a minute. But then what I would have done in the past is at the next event, I would have made sure I was wearing something different. And I don't do that anymore. Like I'll wear the same outfit again. And I'm getting like, and I'm hardly ever buying new stuff. So it's definitely impacted me.
Right. So I suppose it's time to get into this episode.
Yes. Lauren Bravo is a freelance journalist and an author. Her new book, How to Break Up with Fast Fashion, does a couple of things, as well as highlighting the shocking statistics of just how much we're screwing the planet with fast fashion. And I mean, I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was this bad.
Yeah, it's intense.
It also offers up practical solutions of what we can actually do about it, as well as delving into the spending habits that have kind of got us into this mess in the first place. And it does it all with a really kind of non-patronizing tone. It's not telling you off, it's like telling you how, which I think is great. So yeah, really enjoyed this episode.
In this episode, we talk about fast fashion, changing habits, and being a little bit better.
Hi, Lauren Bravo.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Would you say that writing this book right here, what we've got, How to Break Up with Fast Fashion, would you say writing this has changed your life?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think it has. I think writing the book has solidified or calcified, or whatever word we're using now, the thing that I tried to do, which was move away from fast fashion, end that toxic relationship. Now I've written a book about it. It means I've pretty much got to stick to it.
Yeah.
So that's helpful. You know, I don't know if I would have had a bit of a backslide had I not written the book, but I don't have to find out now because it's out there, it's in print. I pinned my colours to the sustainable fashion mast, and I won't go back now, I don't think.
That's kind of quite nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got a thing now, you've got a cause. And
right. I mean, not everyone can write a book to kind of make them stick to their resolutions. Yeah. So I'm pretty lucky in that respect, I think. And Yeah, it's also, I would say it's changed my life in that I've learned so much I didn't know before I started researching it. There's still so much out there that I don't know. You know, I wrote the book really quickly. So every day now I'm coming across new stats and new things that I wish I'd put in, and stuff that, you know, has been discovered even just in the months since I wrote it. So yeah, it's set me on a journey.
For anyone listening who doesn't know what fast fashion is, what is fast fashion?
So, yeah, it's interesting. There isn't really a set definition, just as there also isn't a set definition for sustainable fashion, which does make things a little bit trickier. But fast fashion, as I normally describe it, is characterised by two things, speed and volume. So it's about the speed that people are churning out clothes, and that has... it's increased hugely even just over the last 15, 20 years. I think Zara say that they can now get a design from drawing board to the shop floor in about 10 days. I think for some brands it's even shorter than that. Yeah, it's mad. So where we used to have 4 seasons a year, you know, and you would shop for maybe your winter wardrobe and your summer wardrobe, we now have closer to a kind of 52 season a year system. So the big high street retailers that we're all familiar with, they are churning things out on a weekly basis, which means that clothes are not on the shop floor for very long, which means there's a lot more waste because they're basically producing more clothes than we could ever buy or wear. You know, even if we were all going down the shops every day, filling our wardrobes with this stuff, there aren't enough days in the year or hours in the day for us to wear those clothes. So they are inherently being produced to be wasted. So that's when we talk about fast fashion, it's cheap as well. There's an interesting thing though obviously the book is called How to Break Up with Fast Fashion, and fast fashion, so cheaply produced, cheaply sold clothes are the sort of, they're under the spotlight at the moment. They're the ones getting the heat. But actually something I do talk about in the book as well is that more expensive clothes are by no means kind of free from these problems. So actually a lot of the time, the pricier brands, just as bad, if not worse. Like they are kind of wreaking more environmental damage, and they're not being held accountable because people assume that if you spend £200 or £300 on a dress, it's probably going to be more ethical, and it's not.
Yeah, that was one of the things that blew me away from the book is like you mentioned in there, the Burberry bonfires, just getting rid of all of the old stock because they'd rather see it burn than have people like lower classes wearing their
the Daniela Westbrook moment that people might remember from 10 years ago or whatever, that association with kind of the wrong kind of customer.
Because didn't they with the typical Burberry print, what is it, a tartan?
Yeah,
it's a tartan. Okay, I'm not sure what the definition of a tartan is. So
no, I don't know. My boyfriend's Scottish. I should know this. By the way.
A check or something. Yeah.
But the Burberry tartan, they stopped producing that for years, didn't they? Because the baseball hat. Burberry baseball hat became
the chav connotation.
Yeah, right. It was. And
I wasn't going to say the word chav.
No, I wasn't either. But
I didn't want to offend anyone.
But that's what it was. That is the word we all used back in the day. And it's there was a lot of snobbery kind of tied up in that. And so, and there's, I guess you can understand brands wanting to protect their brand identity. That I get that. But when it means incinerating £28.6 million worth of stock that could be worn by people that, would stop other clothes being produced, it's gross, isn't it? It's so gross. And Burberry they came under fire because they got picked up on it, but loads of other brands have been doing it. Like H&M used to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how, so with those bigger brands, how are they with, we know that obviously they're wasting their stock, but surely if I'm paying £200 for an item, then it's been made by an artisan, right? And it's beautifully... No? Really?
No. Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of brilliant sustainable brands, particularly new ones coming up at the moment, where, you will pay £200 for something that has been beautifully made. It's, the person who made it has been paid fairly. The quality is better. It will last you a lot longer. Your price per wear investment will be worth it. Sure, like those clothes are definitely out there. But a lot of the time, those kind of mid-range brands are definitely no better. Often they're being made in the same factories as the cheaper clothes. And it's a question of transparency. So this is Fashion Revolution, who are, one of the biggest kind of bodies campaigning for sustainable fashion. They're amazing. They produce something called the Fashion Transparency Index every year, where they look at, I think the last one was 200 brands, 200 of the biggest brands in the world. And they really dig down into everything that brand is publishing about the manufacturing process, the fibres, the fabrics, the farming that goes into it, how much they're telling us about what they pay their workers, how things are shipped, everything. And so many of those really premium brands are scoring really, really low. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the worst, but what it means is they're not telling us anything. And generally, I think you can kind of assume that if they're doing good stuff, they're going to be telling us about it. Like they're going to be shouting about it from the rooftops. Yeah. So that's the interesting thing. And, fashion has long been this very secretive industry. It's very opaque. Everybody kind of kept stuff to themselves. Even recently, I talked to a brand who have released a new range with some sort of biodegradable fibres. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is a really great development, because it was, stuff that would previously have been synthetics and they can take up to 200 years or whatever in landfill. And I was like, what's the name of the fibre? And they said, oh, we're not telling anybody, we're not releasing that because we want to retain our competitive advantage.
Oh my God.
And I was like, that is the problem right there. So you've done a good thing, but because you're not prepared to make it open source, you're not prepared to kind of share that knowledge, you want to protect your bottom line first. That's why we're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, that shows they're not doing it for the right reason.
Right.
They're not doing it because they want to save the planet or be sustainable. They're doing it because they want to greenwash it basically and make profits from that.
Yeah, it was so disappointing because I was like, God, I want to support you because you've done a good thing and this is a great development, but yeah, you've really kind of got the wrong end of the stick there. That's not because the thing is,
if they played it really smartly and they developed that fibre, then they could sell that to other people. That's the smart thing, and then their business will be more successful from selling that fibre
to their competitors than it would be.
There was a good quote from I think his name's Paul Dillinger, who is works in sustainability at Levi's, and he said, they make all of their kind of formulations open source because if you find out a way to save water and you don't tell people about it, you're kind of a jerk. And that's just stuck in my head ever since. It's true. I get that people need to make a profit and it is a tricky balance. Of course it is. But yeah, you've got to really examine your motives, I think.
It's really interesting, Adam. You just mentioned there greenwashing. One of my questions that I'd written down was, what is greenwashing? Because I'd only heard of it through your book. So I'm glad it's a thing that is actually out there. But so for the listeners, what is greenwashing if they don't know?
So greenwashing is brands trying to, it's kind of pulling the wool over our eyes, or even it's like with a small child where you say, oh my God, look over there, to distract them from something else. So it will often be exaggerating good work that they are doing, or even not exaggerating but just focusing so much on a couple of little crumbs of ethical behaviour, of positive change that they've made, while still carrying on with quite a lot of damaging, pretty terrible behaviour that they're not making an effort to change. So, there's loads of different types of greenwashing, and it's a bit of a fine line because not every brand can suddenly become perfect overnight, right? So there will often be brands who know that they have done things wrong in the past and they are trying to make change, but because they're a huge corporation, right, it might be a bit of a slow process. So I completely accept that no brand is going to completely transform overnight and do everything 100% perfectly. But where greenwashing is a massive problem is when they are making themselves out to be more ethical and more sustainable than they are, and then not making an effort to change the things they need to change. And often people get kind of duped into buying things that they believe to be ethical, and they're not, because people employ copywriters and marketing agencies. They pay them a lot of money to make things seem fantastic. Use all the right words. You get a lot of this language now, things like thoughtful and conscious, and brands will say things like, "Oh, we make our stuff to be worn and to be loved."
I like the voice you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. This is my my greenwashing voice. And that's great, lovely. Make stuff to be worn and loved, but how are you doing that? Tell me the details. Give me facts. And this is what we really need to be pushing for when we're asking brands. Fashion Revolution has sort of run the hashtag for years now, hashtag Who Made My Clothes. You need to be getting those details. It's not enough to just say, we visit all of our factories and we work closely with suppliers. Brilliant, great. Tell us more. Who are they? Where are they? How much are they paid?
And visiting them and paying them a fair living wage is a very different story.
Very different, and you'll get brands that will say, all of our clothes are designed in our friendly studio in Somerset, and they'll have lovely pictures of their staff sitting around, and it's like, well, that's great, but if all your clothes are still being produced in Bangladesh, that doesn't mean anything. So, greenwashing is a big problem, and unfortunately, as sustainability has become more zeitgeisty, it's a trend, that's a really sort of dangerous fact, but it is at the moment. It means that brands are maybe putting more effort into making themselves appear virtuous because it's a quicker fix than actually putting the effort into changing things.
Yeah, you mentioned in the book, definitely pertaining to language, of like you put down the actual percentages of how often words are being used more now year on year.
Yeah.
And what are some of the key buzzwords that are being
overused? Well, I think in the book I've got feminist appears on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think even just in 3 years, feminism, I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, sorry, but it appears on homepages. I think it was like, 30% more or even larger than that. And it is very interesting, I think, seeing manufacturers and marketers pick up on these buzz phrases and use them without necessarily following through on what they're supposed to mean. So you can have a T-shirt that says feminist across it, but if the young woman, and it will be a young woman who has made that T-shirt, is being paid absolute poverty wages, it's not feminism, is it? It isn't. And customers, are quite trusting. I think a lot of the time shoppers are, because we want to believe in the brands that we like, and a lot of the time people don't have time. It's a privilege of time.
Well, when you mentioned the analogy of the kid being distracted by look over there, like, we're the kid, aren't we?
We're the kid.
We're so easily led like that.
Yeah, we are. And, when we're shopping, we want to believe the best in people, I think, a lot of the time. And so, you come across a brand that seems to be doing stuff differently and has a positive message, you're going to want to buy into that, people.
Also, you want to feel like you're doing the right thing as well, and you're just taking these people's word for what you're doing is right.
Absolutely.
Because it's like people don't have the time to go and look into everything. Obviously, it's great that resource you told about earlier, where you can go and actually see people's ratings.
That is brilliant.
What's it called?
The Fashion Transparency Index. It's by Fashion Revolution. Yeah.
I think that's a great thing to have, and especially I don't know if they have an app or something, but if you can quickly go on it and walk down the high street and be like, cool, before I go into this shop, because my girlfriend's uncle is actually a food hygiene inspector. And I didn't realise there was a thing called Scores on the Doors. Scores
on the Doors, yeah.
Which you can just go to any restaurant, type it in and see their food hygiene rating.
Yeah. So whenever I eat with Adam now, it's like, we're not going in here.
Yeah, because anyways...
You do not want to know what goes on in here.
Yeah.
Right, well, so there are equivalents for the fashion industry. So there's an amazing website called Good On You, goodonyou.eco, I believe is their URL. They have a huge directory of hundreds of thousands of brands. And you can go in, type in the brand, and it will have a page and a rating. They rate everybody from avoid, not good enough, it's a start, good, and great or excellent, I think.
Yeah.
And so that is a brilliant resource, and they've really kind of done their research. I think they kind of revisit brands every few years as well and refresh their evaluations of them. And there are some surprises on that. So, Primark scores higher than a lot of other brands on that directory because they're trying, and it's still very debatable kind of to what extent that can really make a difference when they're still producing at the rate and speed that they are. But I think people would be really surprised. You go and kind of look up your favourite brands. Things like Free People and Anthropology, they were big shocks for me. So they're owned by the same people as Urban Outfitters. And they score terribly across the board in all of these kind of surveys and studies. They score appallingly, and yet their clothes are so wafty and bohemian and pricey, frankly. Anthropology clothes are not cheap. And so you kind of just assume, because they look a bit hippie-ish, right? And Free People is literally called Free People. And that did actually start off as a pretty ethical brand from what I understand. Then it got bought out by the big company. And there is another app, so I've just got my phone out so I can check it. Kogo, COGO, and that has just launched, or I think maybe is kind of at a soft launch stage. And that is promising to be like Scores on the Doors, but for for fashion, so you should be able to look up brands as you're out and about and really sort of find out what's going on behind the scenes. So
yeah, it's great because I think the more awareness that gets out around that kind of stuff, where people can easily just go and see, then it's like then the brand's actual value to its customer massively drops because people will just stop shopping there.
Yeah, exactly.
And especially as people are moving into more of a sustainable mindset, then they'll have to react. So I think stuff like that's only good for the industry because it will force people to be honest and be open.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's it. I think it's honesty. I think the bravest brands are the ones that kind of say, look, we know we've got problems, but here they all are laid out for you to make your own decision. I think that's really important, and not enough of them are kind of confident enough to do that. Yeah, it's a tricky time.
Yeah, especially when you've got brands that like, say, like big fashion brands that you'll spend a lot of money for, and you know that the actual cost of that material to make that, you're buying it for the brand name, so you can walk around and say like, this is me.
Yeah,
but
totally.
like, so I imagine they're probably the most scared because if they've survived for years just off that brand name, whether they put out good quality things or not, like they could continue to do it. Like they could literally go to Primark, buy a t-shirt, put their name on it, resell it, and it would be able to sell for 10 times the amount of money.
Yeah.
So it's like, if that is at risk, like that, they're going to have to change it. So that's probably why they're so like, oh shit, we don't want to just lose all of our market.
That's it, definitely. I think we're having to sort of reevaluate what we mean by value as well. I think that's something that's quite interesting that's happening at the moment, is we're sort of taking stock of what we mean when we say that things are worth the money. Like, one of the kind of lines that gets trotted out a lot, particularly in sort of women's fashion media and just among women generally, and probably men as well, I don't know, but is that idea of an investment buy. So this is something I've written about a few times, because often if you're trying to justify buying something quite expensive, that is the line that your friends will use to kind of, encourage you to punch your pin in. They'll be like, oh, but it's an investment buy and you'll wear it for years. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes it isn't at all. Like, spending more money on something does not mean, unless you're wearing it out of guilt, but even then it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to get more wear out of it. And I think that is something we're having to sort of challenge ourselves in as well, thinking about our like personal relationship with what's in our wardrobe. Like, why are there some things that we will wear to death and other things that we will buy and love and spend loads of money on, wear 3 times and then just fall out of love with, get bored with, and often it's what you were saying, you're kind of seduced into buying something because of this illusion of quality. So if it's got a sort of cheechy label in it comes from a fancy shop that smells really nice or whatever, and it's in like a cardboard carrier bag with tissue paper, you convince yourself that you love the actual thing, whereas if you had picked it off the rails in H&M, you wouldn't. So I think a lot of the kind of smoke and mirrors around the way that clothes are marketed to us, I think we're having to sort of try and unpick that a little bit. Clear the smoke, smash the mirrors.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you were talking, Ad, I was kind of thinking it's a very, very difficult problem, because I've noticed in the past couple of years how fur seems to be coming back into fashion. And we know what happens and we know how a fur coat is produced. And when you look at like a company like Canada Goose, that I've seen the videos online of what happens to the animals that are hurt during the production of their clothing. But yet, I mean, because I feel a bit queasy every time I see someone wearing a Canada Goose coat, because I know what's gone into the production of that. Aside from sustainability, this is just like animal cruelty. However, they were so smart by pricing it so high that as soon as people see that little circle on your shoulder, it's like, that's more important to them, of like, I want you to know that I've spent a shitload on this coat. And that's more important to me, portraying that to you, than where my coat was produced and how it was produced. And that's the scary thing for me, is that even if there is the information out there, we need to make it cool that I buy sustainable,
Right.
rather than the status behind the label.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I suppose your purchase is a reflection on what you want yourself to be perceived as. So if you buy things that you know are sustainable, that's saying that I'm someone who cares about sustainability. If you buy something for the value of it, to show that you're signaling to other people that you have lots of money, it's all signaling, isn't it? It's like you purchase stuff to signal what you want yourself to be perceived as.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of tribal identity as well. I think, you know, people want to sort of identify the group of people that they want to fit in with. I think often, yeah, I mean, the whole Canada Goose thing is not my realm of fashion at all. I don't understand why anyone would want to wear one of those coats, but obviously they have done a really good job of setting themselves up as
very clever.
Some sort of aspirational brand. And I think it's hard because in an ideal world, we would want everybody to be making all their purchasing decisions based on kind of moral principles and questions. But the reality is humans, like, we're flawed, and not everybody is always going to be thinking about all of these kind of ethical criteria every time that they buy something. And that's why, I mean, in the book, obviously I talk a lot about the humanitarian and the environmental impact of fast fashion, but I also was really keen to talk about the kind of individual impact that our shopping habits have on us, so like the cognitive impact that they have. And some people might say, well, that shouldn't matter. We shouldn't be looking at this on an individualist level. It should be all about the greater good, all about thinking about, you know, the people that are suffering for those clothes, the landscapes that are suffering for them. And I agree with that, but I just don't think it's realistic. I think you have to meet people where they are, you know, and you have to reach them in all the different ways that you can. So for some people, thinking about the environment will be the thing that makes that change. And for other people, it just won't be. You know, if that was the case, we'd all be vegans, wouldn't we? And I still can't quit halloumi. Like, you know, I think I'm in favour of doing whatever makes the quickest change. And I think often that is compromising with people and kind of speaking to them in their own language and sort of realising that everybody has a different set of criteria. And that's also really important when we talk about the privilege of sustainable fashion, because it's all very well if you've got enough money and enough time and you are like a sort of, you know, straight size on the high street, you're under a size 16 or whatever, and you kind of feel generally happy and represented by fashion. It makes it so much easier then to make all these changes that I'm talking about, like go to charity shops instead, buy lovely sustainable brands, spend a bit more, fine. But, you know, if you're kind of living on the poverty line, if you have kids to clothe, if you are plus size, and it's really hard to buy good vintage and good secondhand stuff if you're bigger, all of that stuff you have to take into account. And like, I think what I've learned, particularly in sort of this year and writing this book, is just that it's a big, messy topic, and there are no silver bullet solutions. There really aren't. Yeah. Like, I think I say in the book that it's a little bit like that lateral thinking puzzle where you're trying to get like a goat and a chicken and a bag of grain across a river.
Yeah, backwards and forwards.
Yeah. So like, every time you kind of come across a solution, there will always be an opposing argument or somebody who pops up and says, well, actually, I think you'll find, you know, that is not appropriate for X number of reasons. And yeah, it's really hard.
It's like I learned the other day that the carbon footprint of a paper bag is just as big as that of a plastic bag.
Oh, no. See, I didn't know that. Oh, don't tell me that.
I mean, Google it and fact check that, because this is just my friend said it to me. But
but then again, that's kind of, yes, they have the same carbon footprint, but then one's going to biodegrade, one's going to be around for
I don't know if that takes into account what happens after you get rid of them or not.
That sounds like a Daily Mail headline of like, well, actually.
Yeah.
On the cognitive side of things, how are brands flipping that onto us, and like how are they sustaining this huge turnover of clothing and making people just buy consistently?
It's a good question. It's an interesting one, because I would say it's happening across, you know, all genders, but I do think there's a lot of misogyny inherent in fashion. That's something I'm quite interested in. There's a stat that the global supply of used clothing has 7 times more women's wear than men's wear. So I think it's very obvious that there is a particular pressure that is put on women to feel like we are only as good as our last outfit. You know, we have to be constantly kind of debuting new looks. And
that idea of you can't be seen in the same thing twice.
Right, yeah. I mean, this is something I've written about in the book. It's ludicrous, but so many of us buy into it, and I certainly do, or at least I did, and I'm trying to change that habit. But that idea that when you're getting dressed in the morning, you would think about what you're doing and who you're going to see that day and what you were wearing last time you saw them. Yeah. And it ends up being this kind of impossible mental gymnastics where you're going, okay, well, last time I saw Kate, I was wearing the brown jumper, but then last time I saw Charlotte, I was wearing the green dress. So I can't wear either of those because I'm seeing them both today. So actually, and it's so mad, and nobody cares. Like, genuine, nobody cares. Nobody really even remembers what you wear.
Yeah.
But we somehow have internalized this pressure. And I think that the marketers and the brands, you know, they have a massive part to play. But also we need to look at the media, and social media as well is a big cause of all of this. You know, the kind of rise of the Instagram influencer and the kind of illusion of like a single-use wardrobe.
Yeah.
You know,
You
'cause
gotta love like party fashion now, don't you? Where
Yeah.
like people will go and buy something for that weekend, and then next week they'll buy something for that weekend again.
Totally, yeah, and that's been really perpetuated by celebrity culture. You know, this culture we live in, where if Kate Middleton wears a coat that she wore 2 years ago, that is like headline news. Like, isn't she great? She's re-wearing her coat. Yeah, she's just wearing a coat. That's just being normal.
But I mean, a couple of years ago, that would be like a faux pas, and it would be highlighted as. So at least I guess there is some sort of positive movement.
Yeah, it is. Very slowly, we are sort of moving away from that mindset, but. You know, and yet, I mean, Jo Swinson, I think recently was kind of attacked for wearing the same dress on lots of public occasions. But I mean, I'm sure Jeremy Corbyn's wearing the same suit he's probably had for 30 years, isn't he? And no one's even going to notice. So there's definitely a disparity there. I think often the language as well that magazines use, so the must-haves. You know, we're in an interesting place at the moment where you've got a lot of media making quite a concerted effort, and like I know, right, because I'm a journalist that gets commissioned to write this stuff, so I'm really grateful that a lot of my editors are amazing and they are really recognizing that we need to make these changes, and they're letting me write stuff about vintage clothes and renting clothes and swapping and all different ways of being more sustainable. But then, you know, if you scroll down the page or you turn the page, there will still be kind of 15 must-have items you need this season, or, you know, all the things we're going to buy from Zara on payday. And it's really difficult to make those shifts because ultimately those brands need to make money. Like magazines and websites are having a tough enough time at the moment. So I get it, I do, but it's really sad that we're still so wedded to that kind of language and that sort of messaging around fashion. But yeah, I guess me writing, you know, 10 articles about loving what you already own is not going to bring in any ad revenue. So I don't know what the solution is. I wish I did.
Is it not?
Well,
I feel like people are reading that stuff.
I think they are, but often websites particularly make money from affiliate links.
Oh, fuck, right.
So shopping galleries, clicking through. Like,
oh, shit.
Yeah, I used to write a column that was very focused on sustainable fashion and making the most of what you already own, but I quite often would have to put shopping links on the end of it, you know, and I wasn't comfortable with that, and I'm sure my editors probably weren't either, but it was just what you had to do to bring in money, keep everyone afloat. Yeah.
Crazy. Holy shit.
Yeah,
right,
sorry,
well,
I know. It's a doozy. That's what I mean. There are no clear solutions. We're all kind of just muddling our way through.
Yeah, you mentioned that no one wants to feel told off.
Yeah.
And so how do we have this conversation? How do we get this awareness out there without telling people that they're absolute arseholes for going and buying a top from Zara?
I mean, jokes, I think. Like, a few people have read the book and they've been quite surprised that it's funny. And I don't really know how to write anything that isn't, to be honest. Like, I'm always trying to shoehorn in a bad pun or a bit of a dad gag or whatever if I can. I think what I was saying about meeting people where they're at is really important. So recognising that everybody will have their own slightly different motivations for making a change, whether that's recognising that fashion was making them quite unhappy and quite stressed out, wanting to sort of reclaim all the time that they used to spend shopping and like going to the post office to take back their ASOS returns, or, you know, the environmental factors, the humanitarian factors, all of that. I think kind of trying to meet people from different angles and not expecting everybody necessarily to sort of have the same reaction to the same set of information. And I think not judging people. So I've learned so much in writing this book that I didn't know last year and I didn't know 5 years ago and 10 years ago. If you'd asked me, like, I wouldn't have had a clue. And I was going to Primark and doing my big hauls and buying so much cheap shit that I didn't wear. And yeah, I think you have to recognise that everybody is on a journey. And, you know, if they're engaging with the conversation, if they are at least willing to listen and think about these things, then that is a start. Not everybody is going to, like, cut up their credit cards overnight and sort of, you know, resign themselves to a capsule wardrobe and go down the charity shop immediately. But if you can plant the seeds of those ideas, and if you can sort of make them think a bit more carefully about whether they need stuff and why they think they do, then that helps. And it's really hard because it is a race against time, right? You know, when you've got Extinction Rebellion saying we've got less than 11 years or whatever it is to halt climate change before it's completely irreversible and we're all fucked, then it does feel like the pressure is on and we don't really have time. But I think we can still make a change faster if we are willing to be less judgmental and more forgiving and more understanding of where people are at. I think that is still ultimately a more productive way of approaching things than being very puritanical about it, expecting everybody to be 100% flawless all the time, and attacking them if they're not. And one thing that I am finding a little bit, thankfully not too much yet, but as soon as you put your head above the parapet with any of these issues, anything kind of environmental or ethical, people immediately then want to examine every area of your life, you know, and they want to sort of challenge everything you ever do. And like I said, I'm not vegan yet. Like I'm getting there. I'm trying, you know, I am trying, but I'm not there yet. I have still flown on aeroplanes this year. Like, again, not much, and neither my partner or I drive. You know, we get public transport everywhere, so I hope that kind of helps offset it a bit. But I'm absolutely...
And we've all got mobile phones.
We've all got mobile phones. Like, you know, none of us are saints. We're really not. And I think even the people that are doing everything amazingly, like, aren't really going to affect much change by walking around as kind of, you know, saintly bastions of ethical behaviour. I just don't think that's the way to get through to people. I think it's opening up conversations and, you know, being accepting of each other's flaws, but also just constantly pushing to do a bit better. So the little motto that I have kind of running through the book is, we can only do the best we can do, but most of us can probably do better than we are. And I think that is kind of the crux of it, I hope, is accepting that we're all flawed, but also we should all be making a bit of a change. Every day we should be trying a little bit harder to be a little bit better.
I love that.
Thank you.
That's really cool. What are you doing? What's your fashion habits now?
Now, right, so I'm coming to the end of a year where I haven't bought any new clothing. And by that, I mean new clothing. So I have still shopped in charity shops and I've still bought things secondhand. And I'm never going back to the high street or to fast fashion. I'm pretty confident in that. For all of the reasons, all of the important reasons that I've written about in the book, but also for a selfish reason, which is I can't be arsed. The idea of going into Zara now just makes me tired. It makes me want to have a nap. Yeah, I know. And do you know what? I wish I could be like, I have completely unpicked all of those kind of negative, all of the negative relationship that I had with fashion before. And now I get up every morning and I put on the same jumper and jeans and I feel completely at peace with myself and my body and my style. That's not true. Like, it's going to take a lot longer than a year to completely undo all of that conditioning. And I think I will always love clothes. I think I will. Like, they're my outlet, my kind of creative expression. And I think they can be an amazing tool for positive things as well. You know, they're the way that people find, like I was saying, find their tribe. They're the way that people kind of set themselves apart from other people. There's something really powerful in clothes used as a sort of way to speak when you can't feel like you can't verbalize things. So I'm never going to be somebody who has a wardrobe of, like, you know, 20 beige shirts and just wears them every day, because I can't imagine anything more miserable. But what I have learned now is that shopping, and particularly buying umpteen new things a month, it never cured me. Like, it never cured those cravings. It never made me feel more self-confident. If anything, it was doing the opposite. It was chipping away at my self-esteem. Yeah. It was making me feel like every time I felt a bit shit or a bit ugly or a bit unworthy, I should just buy it better. So yeah, that's where I'm at now. So I've made it a whole year. I'm quite proud of that because I didn't think I would. And this year, my plan is I'm going to try and buy less, actually. So I'm going to try and buy even fewer things from charity shops and from eBay, etc., because I don't need all of the clothes that I have. You know, I still don't get enough wear out of everything. I've got so much to be going on with. I want to challenge myself a bit more to create new outfits from things like that I've had for years. So pulling out the dregs of my wardrobe and really mixing things up. I'm a big fan now of trying on sessions. Like it's like I'm sort of 13 again at a sleepover. Just like, put some music on and have a little dressing up session and put new combinations together and think, oh, actually maybe that would look, this relatively new thing that I bought from a charity shop might actually look good with that thing I've had for 8 years, which I stopped wearing because I didn't have anything to go with it. So that's fun. I want to do more of that. I want to do less shopping altogether. But I am also going to occasionally let myself buy the odd new thing from a sustainable brand, because there are some really great, lovely sustainable brands coming through. And I think, I want to support them, and they deserve kind of our customs. So I don't want to tell everybody never buy a new thing again. We can only buy secondhand. I think that is a solution for some people, but not for others. So
yeah, definitely.
That's what I'm doing.
I really like the idea of your trying on sessions. I feel like one, just for the fact it allows you to realize what you have, because so many people just have drawers and drawers and drawers and wardrobes of stuff.
Oh my God, yeah.
Never see.
That's it. We only wear, I've made this stat up, this isn't real, but it feels like we only wear like 10% of our wardrobes, maybe 20. You wear the stuff that is at the top of the pile, you wear the stuff that you've washed, that you can kind of get off the radiator that doesn't need ironing or whatever. And we're creatures of habit a lot of the time, so I still do it. I'll get in a little rut with an outfit. I wore this exact outfit yesterday, and I didn't really go out or see anybody yesterday, so I was like, I'm going to wear it again today because I liked it. And I will do that if I buy something new, secondhand new, but if I buy something new that I really like, I will want to wear it endlessly for a month. And then the boredom sets in, the ennui kind of sets in, and psychologists call it habituation. So the idea that, you get used to something and then the novelty wears off and then you're bored of it and you're constantly seeking the thrill of the new. So I think it's quite a natural human instinct we have to fight against a little bit. Like you say, one way of fighting that boredom and making old clothes feel new and exciting again is getting them out and putting them with different stuff. And this is why I'm a bit conflicted on the concept of wardrobe culls and capsule wardrobes. So one of the things that people will often say to you is that you need to have a massive wardrobe clear out. I have a whole chapter in the book on this. People will say you have to do the whole Marie Kondo thing, get rid of everything. And this is where it really gets me. They'll say, get rid of stuff you haven't worn in a year. That's bollocks. Like, that is ridiculous, because fashion, we know this, it's so cyclical. Things go round and round and round. And if you're somebody who does follow trends, is interested in being part of that kind of wider cultural cycle of things kind of going round and round, then no sooner do you get rid of something, send it to the charity shop, than like the next month it'll be back in vogue or whatever. Like, it just, and
you're like, I should have kept those buffalo shoes.
Oh my God. Hey, you say that, I literally bought a pair of buffalo platforms last month. They're amazing. They're clogs. I got them in my charity shop. They're leather. I love them. They're beautiful. Anyway, so for some people, kind of having a capsule wardrobe really works, and they find that having that constraint actually makes them feel more creative and they feel a lot more at peace with their wardrobe. So I'm totally on board with that if that's what works for you. But in terms of actually getting rid of stuff, by all means, pack it away in the loft, put it in a trunk, clear out, sort your stuff out regularly. But don't get rid of stuff if you still like it just because you haven't worn it in a while. Like, if it fits you, if it makes you feel okay, if, there's no reason really to get rid of it apart from you're a bit bored of it, hang on to it if you can, if you've got the space. Because so many times this year I've dug out old stuff from many years ago, put it with something newer, and suddenly seen it through new eyes. Yeah.
One thing the girls here have done is got all of their old stuff that they're not wearing anymore and brought it in, and then of all swapped it with each other.
Right, yeah.
And the boys were banished, but from all accounts, they had a lot of fun, like trying on each other's stuff and like, oh no, this would look good on you, and this goes with that from, like, so you take that from Kaylee and you add that from Becky, and then you've got like the perfect outfit. So
yeah, I'm a big fan of the clothes swap. We're seeing them kind of formalised as well now, so there are lots of amazing startups happening that are kind of peer-to-peer rentals, so a bit like Airbnb for clothes. You can kind of meet up and swap or rent things to people who live nearby. We're also seeing there's great organisations, there's one called Swap Rebellion that organise big clothes swaps on like a kind of big scale community kind of led things. But yeah, even like that, a kind of grassroots version. We all need to be a bit more savvy when it comes to just borrowing stuff off our mates. I really believe this, particularly for stuff like weddings. Like, I've been to 28 weddings over the past 7 or 8 years. And I haven't bought a new outfit for every single one, but I have definitely been victim to that pressure, like feeling like, you know, if you were in photos at the last wedding wearing that dress, you can't be in photos at the next wedding wearing the same dress because, oh my God, what will people think? And there is even a bit of rhetoric I have read on like Mumsnet and stuff around people thinking that is genuinely disrespectful to the bride and like to the married couple, like that.
Yeah, every man would probably wear the same suit to
Oh my
28.
God. My boyfriend has a kilt that he has worn since he was 21. It's full of moth holes. And he has his work suit with like a jazzy tie. And those are his 2 wedding outfits. And he's worn them to every single wedding. So, yeah, I think for things like that, just borrow stuff off your mates if you can. Like, really think about it. You don't need another clutch bag. You don't need these ridiculous items that we would never wear in normal life, like pastel bolero jackets and nude court shoes. And like, just...
One of the most poignant things you said is that no one gives better advice than your past self.
Oh yeah.
And that's so bang on, is when you explain it when you look back.
Yeah, so that's the idea that actually when you do a big wardrobe clear out, and maybe you are getting rid of some stuff that you know you're never going to wear again, have a look at that stuff and really think, why haven't I worn it? What is it? And often you'll be able to kind of pinpoint it down to stuff like, it will be things that didn't quite fit, but you bought it anyway, and then you felt terrible every time you wore them. Things that you got intimidated into buying. Like, I mean, I'm a terrible one for buying stuff out of politeness. So, you know, when you go into like a really empty boutique and there's like a really friendly lady.
Oh, yeah.
And, oh God, and you maybe try something on and she's all like, that looks amazing on you. That's so great. And then you're like, before you know it, you're handing over your card, even though you know you don't want this thing. So anything you've bought under duress like that, often you won't wear. Sometimes it will be certain fabrics. So maybe, you know, scratchy kind of synthetic fibres just don't, like, they irritate you. You don't wear them. You don't feel good when you wear them. And then you know when you kind of are looking for something to wear in the morning, you're not going to reach for that item. Yeah. Certain colours, maybe you really want to wear a certain colour, but actually whenever you put it on, you just don't feel it suits you. You know, we've all got our own kind of personal foibles. But yeah, when you do a big wardrobe clear out, I think you can't just bag it up and send it off to the charity shop. I think it really pays. And this is a little bit masochistic, but it really pays to sit with that stuff, look at each item, think about when you bought it, how much you paid for it, what mood were you in at the time? Was there some kind of ulterior motive? Were you buying it to try and be a person that deep down you know that you're not? You know, I think a lot of us buy clothes that are a little bit fancier than our everyday lives. You know, like we want to believe we're the person who's going to put on like a kind of bias cut slip dress and like a nice pair of heels to go out for sort of day-to-day life. But we're not. We don't wear that stuff. We wear jeans, we wear jumpers. So I think just confronting all of that stuff, I think, is a really good way to pick up some tips for shopping in the future.
I've done it. What I've started to do is I sell a lot of stuff on eBay, and recently I've had like a massive clear out. We've talked about it in another episode. Like, I actually made £3,000 from selling all of my old stuff. And through doing that, analysing what I was selling, I now, before the purchase, I go, oh, that's nice. And then I think, is that going to be on eBay in a year's time?
Right.
And I can kind of work out which stuff is and which stuff isn't, which has kind of really helped me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I try when I'm struggling to sort of make a decision over a purchase, I have my mum's voice in my head quite a lot, and she would always say, tell me 3 things you're going to wear it with. They have to already be in your wardrobe, and tell me, where are you going to wear this? So I think, you know, really asking yourself those questions, like, do I have occasions coming up that I'm going to wear this thing to? Can I picture myself wearing this on like a bog standard Tuesday? Yeah, and exactly like you said, am I going to be getting rid of this again in a year's time?
But Mum.
I know, you've got to be your own mum. Don't really be that nagging voice in your own head.
She's a smart mum.
Oh, she is, yeah.
You're one of those annoying people that's known what they've wanted to do forever. That's it. That's the tweet.
Right, yeah. Yeah. Annoying or unimaginative, maybe. I don't know.
So how did you get into writing?
So I was one of those precocious kids that was always writing little stories and poems and things. I used to write plays and make my friends act them out in the playground.
So?
Unbearable. And when I was 14, my local newspaper advertised for a group of student writers. They wanted young people to comment about the issues that affect young people in the town. And my dad is a journalist, and he really encouraged me to sort of apply for it. So I wrote this silly thing about doing a sponsored walk at school and applied and got selected as one of the panel. And I did that for a few years. They after everybody else kind of went off to university, I was the youngest one. They gave me a weekly column. And so I wrote a weekly column in the Worthing Herald until I was 26, which was, I think it was 11 years I did it in total. And
what kind of things would you talk about?
Oh, God, anything. So at first it was about being a young person in Worthing, but then I moved to London when I was 18. So, and every year I'd be like, they'll fire me soon.
That's so nice. They just loved you. They just wanted to keep you on.
I think they just couldn't quite be bothered to get rid of me. Filled half a page every week. But it was so lovely. It was such a nice outlet to have. I would kill for a column again now. Oh my God, the luxury of being able to just think, what will I write about this week? So I used to write a lot about sort of student life, being broke in London, being a kind of recent graduate, first jobs, things like that. I would write about my house shares, any kind of cultural moments that were happening at the time. So sort of, debates that were happening around women's rights and stuff I would write about quite a lot. And then just stupid things like, the first time I ever went to the dump, very much a sort of, finding my way in the adult world kind of thing. But yeah, so I did that. And then after uni, I worked at a digital agency, actually. So I was much more on the sort of content marketing side of things. But I ended up working for Channel 4 Food, which was awesome. So I used to write all the recaps for Come Dine with Me, and lots of fun listicles and articles about food and stuff like that. And I loved it. And then I kind of branched out into doing a bit of copywriting for other brands, and then went freelance and started being a proper journalist. So, which is a bit of a weird way around, because I think, most people imagine that you have to sort of work your way up in newspapers and really sort of do the old school stuff and learn shorthand and all of that. And I very much kind of sidestepped into the industry a little bit.
What gave you the confidence to go freelance?
So it was that I couldn't get a job. Genuinely. So I'd been at this agency for 4.5 years. I knew I wanted to leave. I was a bit bored of what I was doing, and I really wanted to write proper long form articles, and I didn't want to be beholden to brands anymore. I was bored of shilling stuff.
Yeah.
And I applied for loads and loads of jobs at conventional media titles, and I couldn't get any. I think probably because I'd come from a digital agency. I think they didn't want to know. So, eventually I just thought, well, screw this. I'm going to go out on my own. And I was lucky because I had, at the company I was working for, they let me go down to 4 days a week at first. So I had that extra day a week at home to start kind of building up relationships and making contacts. And I started freelancing for a kind of tech blog, writing bits for them. And then by the time I went freelance full time, I knew I had a bit of work in place. So I had some regular work that had come from the agency. I had a couple of other contacts who'd given me a bit of work. So I knew I had a bit, so it wasn't too terrifying. But
so when you wake up on that day off,
yeah,
and you're like, this is my day to work on my new thing, what does that look like? How were you making those connections? What was happening?
So a lot of it was just pitching articles to people who never emailed back.
Right.
Still is. That is still my day-to-day life, to be honest.
So you'll write the article first. Will you write it with a publication in mind, or?
So you'd write the idea, you just jot down the idea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that is one thing I always tell people is never write the whole article, because chances are you won't then be able to sell it. Or if you do, they will want to completely change it anyway. So it's always better to just write yourself, a few lines, just outline the pitch, the premise of the idea. And so it was me sending loads and loads of those out to people who had no idea who I was, never heard of me, didn't really have the time to click through my links and read my portfolio or whatever. But one thing that really helped me hugely is Twitter. So I was on Twitter from, I think, 2008, and I went along to a meetup. I wrote about this in my first book, actually, we called AWOT, which was the Awesome Women of Twitter. And it was just a load of women in their 20s who were all on Twitter, and we'd all sort of started chatting quite a lot, and thought it would be nice to meet up IRL and see if those friendships could translate into real life. And they did in a lot of cases. And a lot of those people were also kind of in the media. A lot of them were other writers and PRs and things like that. And that really helped. So there was a really nice community of kind of boosting each other. And we had a communal blog where I used to write posts, and I wrote for a few other sites for free, things like that. But it definitely helped having that network. And, Twitter back then, maybe not so much now, but Twitter back then generally was a really supportive place. Yeah. And I definitely kind of made connections with a lot of other writers and editors who would sort of really champion my work, and I would try and do the same for them. And it was it was a nice supportive space, and that definitely did help. I don't think I would have the career I do today if it wasn't for social media.
If you were starting today, where would you look for a network?
That is a good question, isn't it?
I still think Twitter's hugely relevant. I still think
Twitter, yeah. I would still encourage people to be on it. And I think particularly, it's a bit of an unfortunate truth, but I think as a writer, you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit if you're not on Twitter. Yeah. It just makes sense. It's a place to share things that you've done and, give yourself a bit more of a platform. You spot opportunities, you spot conversations. Quite often I will pitch ideas based on things that I've read on Twitter. I do a lot of crowdsourcing of quotes and stuff on Twitter as well, which is probably super lazy, but it's also just so convenient to be like, hey guys, what do we think of this? Yeah. And then you've got 30 people telling you exactly what they think. I would say particularly for sort of any kind of creative job that overlaps with the visual side of things, obviously Instagram still, and Instagram, as we know, has many flaws and downsides. But I still think it can be a really positive place. I know particularly for the sustainable fashion world, there are some really brilliant people out there who are using Instagram in an amazing way to kind of educate people, to start those conversations, to show that there is a different way of thinking about fashion and clothes. Some of my favourite people to follow have really kind of change that whole conversation, like around outfit repeating, what we were saying. I follow these brilliant people who will wear the same stuff again and again and again and show you photos of them wearing it again in slightly different ways.
Wicked.
Yeah, so that's really great. I think also there are a lot of brilliant events happening now. I've never been a big fan of networking. I find it all a bit awkward and awful, but I think there's a lot to be said for going along to those kind of panel talks. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of really brilliant real life meetups, because I think we've realised over the last decade or so that we still need person-to-person interaction. Yeah, like our phones are just never going to fill that space completely. They're never going to satisfy everything that we need. So I do quite a lot of panel talks, and I go along to these events, and there are some amazing freelancer networks. There's so many amazing kind of meetups out there. I know there's Anna Kudriarado, who I think you've had on the podcast before. She started, is it Freelance Journalists and Co? And
FJ and Co.
FJ and Co. Yeah. And it seems like people are really sort of putting their energy now back into creating those real life events and spaces and meetups. And I think there's a lot of exciting stuff happening out there. So I'd really advise kind of people starting out these days to seek out those places, because also it's a really lonely business being a freelancer. Yeah. It really is. I mean, I work in a co-working office these days that I can't really afford, if I'm honest, but it just keeps me sane.
Keeps me
sane. I need it. Yeah.
I would say to people, like, if they're starting out on Twitter, to employ patience, and Instagram as well, like whatever the social media, but those connections, they don't come overnight.
No.
And you have to show up every day and be getting involved in conversations.
Yeah, and you've got to be interesting and entertaining. I think that's one of the mistakes that people often make with Twitter, is you can't just get out there and sort of like, it's not just a shop front, you can't just flog your wares and expect people to come running. You've got to give them some value. You've got to be interesting or funny, or generally funny if you can be, I think, and actually just engage with conversations generally, rather than sort of single-mindedly flogging whatever it is that you want to sell and expecting stuff to come off it. I think you've got to be a bit more holistic than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's the biggest challenge of being freelance? Is it the loneliness, would you say?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think the loneliness I don't find it too bad compared to some people, because I'm always talking to my friends all day anyway. So I have a very active WhatsApp network. And, like I say, through Twitter and things, I do feel like I have those people I can reach out to quite a lot. But definitely the loneliness is a thing. I think getting out of the house, that is something I really struggled with. So I've never been very good at working at home. until I sort of joined my co-working office, I used to work in coffee shops, in the library. I used to go to the British Library quite a lot. I just have to have a reason to get up and get dressed and get out in the morning. So that is definitely something that I sort of have to navigate a little bit.
Is that because like once you've left, then your day can start? Whereas if you're at home, you're like, I'll start working at 1. Oh, and then it's past 1 and you're I'll start working at 2, and it just kind of drifts.
Oh, that's it. It's creating that mental delineation between home and sort of relaxation and work. And we all struggle with that anyway, don't we, right? Like now we check emails on the weekends, we're kind of constantly contactable. So that is something I think we're all battling with. But yeah, particularly when you're freelance. And it also just feels really depressing. Like, I mean, I love my flat, but there's something so bleak about just being sat there, and you can so easily get distracted by domestic stuff. I could waste an entire morning just like putting a wash on and wiping the surfaces and like, oh, I need to go to the post office and post that thing. And there's always admin to be done. So that's part of it. I think, definitely having that mental switch where you sit down at a desk that is not your own and kind of go, right, now I'm working. I mean, don't get me wrong, I struggle with that even when I'm working somewhere else. Like, I am, oh God, it's really bad. A productive day for me is like 7 minutes of writing and then 2 minutes of Instagram and then 7 minutes of writing. Like, genuinely, I have to hide my phone. I have to like put it down the back of the sofa sometimes, or I'll put it like in my bag or under a cushion or something. It's not good. It's not good. But I tell you what I do find is that as soon as I have a bit of a mental block or I'm kind of running out of steam with something, I just get up and like go for a walk is something people always say, but it doesn't even have to be around the park. It can literally just be to the toilet, and suddenly the perfect sentence will come to me, or an idea I hadn't thought of will kind of appear. And it's always when I don't have my phone. I mean, I swim most mornings. Yeah. So
do you think your phone robs you of your ideas? Because it's providing everything for you and it's not allowing you to make the leap.
Probably. That's a good theory. I was going to say it's just sod's law. It's more just like it's always when I'm not able to write it down
right.
that I will have an idea.
Right.
So I always think of good stuff when I'm swimming. And it's like the only time I don't have the means to write stuff down. Yeah. I'll kind of try and hold a paragraph in my head. So I'll literally be writing as I'm swimming, like formulating sentences.
I guess that's because you're getting into flow state.
Yeah, exactly. It really is.
It's kind of being like stoicism. It's that kind of having that stillness in your brain where you're not on anything else. Yeah. It's just like your brain's just allowed to do its own thing.
That's it. And I think one of the things that is difficult with freelancing is you do feel this need to be constantly productive. And I know, right, that is something we're all sort of struggling with generally in modern life at the moment, is this like hyper productive, workism. I think that amazing guy from The Atlantic called it. The idea that we're meant to be constantly producing, even in our social lives, even in our free time, we're meant to be like starting a hobby that can be monetized. My poor mum, I mean, she sews amazing stuff. She does like patchworking and she knits beautiful things, and she's always got a project on the go. And I'm constantly telling her she needs to start an Etsy shop. And she doesn't want to start a bloody Etsy shop. Like, she doesn't. She just likes making stuff. But it is my kind of innate millennial reaction is always to be like, well, how can we monetize this? How can we make it into a business? So I think when you're a freelancer, it's very easy to forget what you were saying, Adam, about sometimes downtime and letting your brain just kind of empty and letting ideas flow. That kind of is work, and it seems like a bit of a cop-out to be like, oh, actually, I'm just going to sit on a park bench for an hour and I'm working. But if the ideas come, then it is. Yeah.
Amazing. I could literally talk to you all day,
but
seeing as you're a busy freelancer, I suppose we better let you go and do some work. Thanks so much for coming on. Tell people where they can find you online.
So I'm at Lauren Bravo, pretty much everywhere. Twitter, Instagram. I don't use LinkedIn, so don't come there.
Well, you should get on it. It's the best platform.
LinkedIn?
Yep, get on LinkedIn. It's the best.
I am on it. I just never check my messages. Okay, all right. I'll get on LinkedIn as well. And my website is laurenbravo.co.uk. And my book is out.
Yes, book is out now. It's called How to Break Up with Fast Fashion. Lauren Bravo, thank you very much.
Thank you.